Theo Maledon, a 6'5" point guard out of France, should end up being a mid-first round pick in this year's NBA draft. He has been mentored by French legend Tony Parker, and you can see some flashes of Tony Parker in Maledon's game. Maledon most recently competed in the EuroLeague and was actually quite productive for a prospect of his age playing at that level. Maledon has good positional size. At 6'5" with a 6'9" wingspan, Maledon is very well suited to play the point guard position and also has the size to play the two. He's also a very crafty player. The crafty ways in which Maledon can score for himself as well as create shots for others reminds you of Tony Parker. He's also one of the best playmakers in the draft. Maledon is a smart passer, a creative passer, has solid vision, and is a good playmaker in a multitude of situations. Maledon is also a good pick and roll player as a ball handler. This is where his craftiness shines the most, and his playmaking out of the pick and roll is very impressive as well. In a pick and roll heavy NBA, Maledon's pick and roll ability translates quite nicely. He also has 3-level scoring potential. He shows some creativity in terms of finishing around the rim. He has a decent mid-range pull-up and a solid floater game already. And although three-point shooting isn't necessarily a strong suit of his, he's not bad in that regard, and it could definitely become a long-term strength. If Maledon becomes a 3-level scorer in the NBA combined with his playmaking, he could be a very, very good offensive guard. Lastly, Maledon also has two-way potential. His size is phenomenal for a guard, and he shows some good defensive traits. I wouldn't be shocked if Maledon became a very good NBA defender. As far as the knocks go for Maledon, the main knock on him is that he lacks an elite skill. In the worst case scenario, Maledon will be a guy who doesn't do anything well at the NBA level, but in the best case scenario, he might be a guy with very few weaknesses. Another knock on him is his shooting consistency. While he's not a bad three-point shooter, he's definitely not consistent. Becoming a more consistent threat from the arc will help open up the rest of his offensive game even more. At this stage in his career, Maledon is definitely not a go-to scorer. He can get buckets from time to time, but he's not the type of guy you give the ball to and expect him to consistently go and do that. His explosiveness is also a bit subpar for a point guard, and while his positional size helps him offset this weakness a little bit, he would be much higher on draft boards if he was a bit more explosive. His lateral quickness also leaves a little bit to be desired. This is the main area that could hold him back defensively. He does have good defensive potential, but it's not because of his lateral foot speed. And lastly, he needs to become a little bit more fundamentally sound on the defensive end. However, fundamental issues defensively are definitely fixable, and it's why I'm not worried about him as a defender long term. So now let's get into the second part of our draft profile, where me and Eric debate a little bit on draft prospects. Now this one will be a little bit of a debate since Eric is higher on Maledon than I am. I do like his game, but Eric is a bigger fan of it than I am. So I want to hear Eric start off with what he likes about his game and just kind of give us a summary of what Eric sees in him.
Well, one of the things I haven't understood with a lot of draft boards and processes and stuff like that is that Killian Hayes seemed to be rising for the last 6-7 months, while Maledon's kind of slipping a little bit. Mm-hmm. And to me, I have them fairly even in terms of grades. At one point, I actually had Theo a little higher than Killian, but I really like his game overall. I think both him and Killian are going to be really good guards and are going to be worthy of draft picks. But I feel like he's the second best passer in this draft behind LaMelo. And that's a pretty big statement, I guess. But he's not quite as flashy as LaMelo, so it doesn't stand out as much. But he reads defenses really well, I feel like. The only problems with his game, in my opinion, are it kind of lacks top end speed, but I feel like he's athletic enough, and I feel like his lack of athleticism is a little overrated. I feel like he's athletic enough to break down defenses. Now, isolation, he's not quite as good, but he is very, very good in the pick and roll, and I feel like he's a plus finisher at the rim. I like the way he's improved his shot over the last year or so. there's just a lot of things I like about him.
Yeah, the thing that hops out to me is he's crafty, and Tony Parker has been his mentor. He's from France, and Tony Parker has mentored his game, and you can kind of see a little bit of Tony Parker.
He plays a lot.
Yeah. The thing is, Maledon is 6'5" with 6'9", so he doesn't have Tony Parker's size. He's bigger than that, which makes him a little bit more intriguing because he has the size to play the two, but his skill set suggests he's a point guard. There's actually quite a bit of big point guards in this draft. You look at Halliburton, you look at Killian Hayes, who you just brought up, his fellow countryman, and you got Maledon, who's big point guard, 6'5", 6'9" wingspan. That's legit size for a point guard. But yeah, I like his playmaking. His playmaking is very intriguing. I don't know if he's necessarily the second best playmaker, but I could see why one would make that argument. That is an interesting debate to have as to who is the second best playmaker behind LaMelo Ball. It's not as flashy, but I like the way he sets up passes. He's able to create passing windows that I feel like a lot of guards in this draft, they don't have the savvy that he does in terms of pivoting a certain way to get an angle to throw a pass towards, like, looking off the defense in order to create a passing window. It's kind of hard to explain. It's kind of something you have to see. We have some highlights playing right now, so maybe they'll be able to see that. But just the way he creates passes and passing lanes, passing windows that aren't there is something that you usually only see out of NBA vets. So the fact that he's already doing that is very promising. I do think his playmaking will be a plus in the NBA. For me, it just comes down to offensively, is he going to be a guy you can kind of give the ball to and he can go get buckets? Now, he can score in crafty ways, but I am a little bit worried about his lack of explosiveness. And he just seems like a guy who's going to be a playmaker, and then he can score here and there, knock down a three, finish around the rim a little bit, but not a guy that's going to be like a 15-point per game scorer, 20-point per game scorer. So he has a high floor, but I have some questions about what his ceiling truly is.
Yeah, I think worst case scenario would be a good floor general. He can run an offense. Like we mentioned, I don't see him necessarily just getting ISO situations where he breaks down another point guard on another team. That's going to be tough for him unless he develops a little bit more creative ball handling ways to get open when you're not quite athletic enough. Mm-hmm. And he's definitely not strong enough quite yet to be able to back someone down or use that size enough in that regard in an ISO situation. But the NBA we know is very pick and roll heavy, so I can see him being effective breaking down a big man that gets switched on to him mm-hmm. or coming off his screen. But the main thing to me is, you mentioned, we mentioned this about a lot of prospects in these profiles. It's going to come down to whether he hits the three-point shot in the NBA.
Yeah.
If he hits the three-point shot above, in the upper 30 percentile to the low 40%, I don't see him being that good of a shooter, but upper 30% three-point shooter, he's going to be, I think, effective enough from there to draw defenses out on him to where he can get by him a little bit.
Yeah, and that's the case with so many prospects in this draft is shooting. Yeah. The thing is, I don't think his jump shot is broken at all. He shot a decent clip in the few games that he played in the Euro League in the past year, and he has decent form. So I don't think it's going to be an issue for him. For me, it's just okay, can he be consistent enough? Because he is a little bit streaky in that regard, I feel like. From everything that I've read, I haven't watched 20 games of his to know just by watching games, but everything that I read says he's streaky. So, the question is, okay, can he be more consistent from the three-point arc? Also, can he adjust to an NBA three-point arc? Because that is something that gets overlooked. Some guys struggle to stretch their range out that far. But I think his shooting is all right. And in a pick-and-roll league, I think he will be somebody that can make it in the NBA because he is really good in the pick-and-roll. Not just playmaking, but he's also able to score out of it. He can get to the rim, and he's kind of crafty with his finishing. He's able to come up with crafty ways to get shots off within 15 feet. Kind of like Tony Parker, the stop on a dime, pump fake, get a defender off their feet, and then pivot, up and under, fade away. He has a lot of ways to score, within 15 feet that I don't see from other guards in this draft. And he's able to, pull up and hit some mid-range shots, and as well as pull up and hit some threes. So the scoring package is there. It's just like he has decent quickness, but just not that elite level of quickness or shiftiness or that elite level of ball handling in order to like break down his guys. So that's the thing. He can hit all types of shots, but I feel like he's going to need to figure out a way to be able to kind of go at guys one-on-one a little bit in order to like truly maximize his offensive potential. If he can do that, he could end up being a great player because of everything else that he already does. So that's the thing is like, I have him ranked 19th, but I feel like that's probably too low. I like a lot of players in this range in the draft, and I feel like he's one of those guys that's just, I feel like being a little bit overlooked and could surprise people and end up potentially being a top 5 player from this draft.
Yeah, like I said, I evaluating him, I don't see a huge difference between him and Hayes, so I don't get why Hayes is thought of as a top 10 pick and Maledon's. I've seen some mock drafts where he falls into the second round and stuff like that, which I think is absolutely crazy. But yeah, like it's weird for a 19-year-old who doesn't have a lot of experience to be that good at being a point guard already, if that makes sense. So that's like something, if I'm like an organization, I can bring him in and be like, okay, well, maybe we can start him off running a second unit and give him some responsibility there. And it's not too young in his career to do that kind of stuff. We see a lot of young point guards come in and struggle with that in the NBA, running an offense and just getting into the sets and doing everything that you have to do as a point guard on an NBA team. So I feel like having a 19-year-old who's already adept at doing that is a huge bonus for him, where he won't have to learn how to make the right passing and stuff like that, or where the ball's supposed to be, because he's smart enough to know that once he learns the offense. So I like that he's that young, and that won't be a concern for him coming into the NBA, and he can focus on his shooting and, like you said, learning how to break down people in more of an ISO situation.
And here's the thing that gives him an advantage too, is if he gets minutes early in his career off the bench, you can pair him next to a point guard. He has the size to defend twos. We need to touch on his defense here in a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
He has the size to defend twos, and he's a decent enough catch and shoot guy that he can play off the ball. So, if you don't want to give him the reins to an entire unit in the NBA early in his career, you could pair him with, a combo guard who can play make a little bit as well and take some of the burden off his shoulders in terms of running the offense and playmaking. He's a good fit next to combo guards because he's one of those big guards that can play the point guard offensively, or he can play the shooting guard offensively. So he would be a good fit next to, say, like a Seth Curry type of guy or a Lou Williams type of guy, where he doesn't have the entire burden, but can step in and play make and let those guys run off the ball as well. So that's something that's an advantage to him potentially getting playing time early in his career. And even, throughout his career, if he develops, he should be a good fit next to pretty much any guard. I've said that about like a Tyrese Halliburton, a Killian Hayes, but I really like versatile guards that are big enough to play the two, but skilled enough in terms of their ball handling and playmaking in order to play the one. And there's multiple guys like that in this draft. Maledon is just another one of them.
And I think compared to most of the other ones in this situation, I think he's more adept at playing the point guard right away. So like a lot of those other guys are more shooting guards right now, and if you just break down their skill set, maybe even though like long term their best position will be point guard, I feel like Maledon can come in and play point right away. It's not necessarily that he has to play the two and you have to have another ball handler with him right away to do that, but like you said, you can do that, so it makes it a lot more versatile for his game if he can play in pretty much any lineup.
Yep. Final thing I want to touch on is his defensive potential, because he could end up being a really good point guard, a really good defensive point guard, because he has the size, he has the length. He kind of struggles in terms of his lateral quickness, but he makes up for it with hustle and with turning his hips, running to get in front at the right times. He can play the passing lanes. He has a long wingspan for a point guard. He's a guy that can go out into the passing lanes and get steals. He has a high defensive potential just due to his size for his position, due to his defensive versatility. If he gets a little bit stronger at 6'5" with a 6'8", 6'9" wingspan, he could potentially guard some NBA threes as well. So you're looking at a guy who can guard 2 or 3 positions and do so at potentially a high level. His defensive potential is very intriguing, I think.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of his problems were technique-based or effort-based. He got a little flat-footed at times, but he did show glimpses of being a really excellent defender, and a lot of times he did move really well. He understood. I feel like he at times lacked a little focus off ball, but when he was locked in, it was really good. If he wasn't locked in, it was really bad. So he definitely needs to clean that up to where it's 100% of the time you're locked in, because you don't want to get in situations in the NBA where you're falling asleep off ball. But I feel like those are easy to clean up as long as you're being broken down the right film and stuff by NBA staff. So I'm not super high on his defensive potential, just because there is something just slightly off there. I feel like watching him a little bit, but I feel like he's going to be like an average to slightly above average defender when he figures it out.
Yep. Just depends on, if a team values defensive versatility, they're probably going to have a higher grade on him. Whereas if you're looking for a guy to lock down that point guard spot, maybe he's not the best due to his, he doesn't have the best lateral quickness. So his defense is definitely an intriguing part of his game. He's just one of these guys. He's a safe pick because one of the weaknesses I listed in the intro of this is he lacks an elite skill. His playmaking could potentially be elite. It's not to say that he'll never be elite at any one thing, but coming into the draft, he's a guy that does a lot of things well, but not one thing phenomenally. But the thing is, all his weaknesses are stuff like, okay, he needs to get more consistent shooting the ball. He's not much of a go-to scorer, but he has a little bit of potential in that regard. And it's stuff like, he's not the most explosive, not the best in terms of his lateral quickness. His defensive fundamentals could use some cleaning up. But that's very finite things. And that's, a lot of that stuff is fixable or stuff that he can work on. So that's the thing. I think he's a safe pick. I think he'll be a guy that has a role in the NBA for sure. I just have him a little bit lower because I like guys that have a little bit higher upside, but he wouldn't be a bad pick at 10 for a team like Phoenix. I think he'd be a good fit next to Devin Booker, and they're trying to win next year, and maybe he could step in right away and be serviceable. They could kind of use a backup guard. So, he's one of those guys that I don't have him that highly ranked, but he wouldn't be a bad pick around the late lottery for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And if he falls out of the lottery, whatever team takes him, I think is getting a steal.
Yep, agreed. So anyway, that wraps up our draft profile on Theo Maledon. I probably butchered that. There's a reason I haven't said his first name. But
Theo, yeah.
Theo. So Theo Maledon, that's our draft profile on him. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe for future draft profiles as we ramp up our coverage until the draft. And we will also be live streaming on draft night. Stay tuned for some details about that. Until next time, thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you later. Peace.